Hey there people, how you doing? So, here we have the OnePlus 9 Pro's camera review. I did promise it after all in the full review, do check that out by the way, that was fairly interesting. But let's get back to these cameras. Now in a nutshell, I would say that the OnePlus 9 Pro has great cameras, but there are quite a few sacrifices here and there to be quite exceptionally good in certain areas where other phones are not so good at. I'll explain why I say that in a moment, but first let us begin with photography. And initially when I started going out and shooting with the OnePlus 9 Pro, it was highly impressive for me. Like, genuinely, I really liked the approach OnePlus had taken, and personally I felt like the colors from the main camera were a little too muted. I much rather preferred the slightly more punchy looking photographs we could get from the ultra-wide cameras. Speaking of the ultra-wide, barring the lowest light night mode situations, this ultra-wide has outperformed every other smartphone that I've ever used, and I think it's fair to say this is the best ultra-wide in any smartphone so far. Like, I'm talking about stuff like the S21 Ultra, a much more expensive flagship than this one, the iPhone 12 series, the X60 Pro Plus even. All of them, like, they pale in comparison to this one's ultra-wide. It's really that good. The real issue, however, is with human subjects. I mean, I've said that before for the OnePlus 8 Pro as well from last year, so clearly OnePlus hasn't improved on that. I mean, you can take some fairly nice selfies and portraits and portrait selfies, but it's never gonna impress you. You know, in my experience, I felt like skin tones were never really spot on. Sometimes they were nice, sure, obviously there are gonna be instances when they're gonna be quite good, but the percentage of that is gonna be very low. And also HDR processing with, you know, highlights on my face or anything like that, it also wasn't all that good. And even though we actually have a 3x optical zoom camera on the OnePlus 9 Pro, you can't actually use it for portraits. I honestly don't know why. Even Samsung had done that when they launched the S21 Ultra, but we got the feature later on the S21 Ultra. Here, however, the 3x optical zoom is not being utilized. You can crop into 2x, but, you know, digitally cropping in is never gonna give you good results, especially when you consider the fact that portraits themselves aren't all that particularly good from the OnePlus 9 Pro. Now moving on to night mode, well, this is where I would say OnePlus has done a good job. Like, the 9 Pro is fairly good, but it could be better. And there's a very obvious reason for it. Basically, the OnePlus 9 Pro can take very good, very detailed and very noise-free pictures when it's normal night mode, you know, when there is some light, but you want to take a long exposure like 2 seconds, maybe at best 3 seconds. Especially with the ultra-wide, with such a large and beautiful sensor, it's quite good when the light is just barely low enough to make you use night mode. But when it comes to like really ultra low light situations, I'm obviously generalizing here, but still, you know, when the light is really low, phones like the S21 Ultra or the iPhone 12 can take 4, 5 and if really required 6 or 7 seconds of exposure. It is gonna be hard to hold it still for that long, but the results will pay off. They will give very good, very clean, detailed images. The OnePlus, on the other hand, it never, like, in the number of photos that I've taken, which can almost amount to more than 100, almost like 200 images that I've taken for night mode, the OnePlus never went above 4 seconds. And that 4 seconds is only on the ultra-wide. On the main camera, it was, I believe, 3 seconds. That was the maximum. And see, that's a very bad limitation. Clearly, we can hold the phone still for at least 5 seconds when the requirement is there. It is also quite obviously the reason why I feel the ultra-wide isn't the best out there in ultra low light and, you know, really dark situations. That crown would actually go to the X60 Pro Plus. Do stay tuned, I'm gonna do the camera review for that one as well soon enough. So, as a whole, photography, I have complaints. There are areas to improve. Definitely with the human subjects, and a little bit with the night mode. But otherwise, it's really good. The overall consistency with contrast, HDR processing, it's all been improved quite a bit, enough for me to say that the OnePlus 9 Pro is more than good enough to be called a flagship camera, barring human subjects. Like if you want to photograph human subjects, then this camera should not be your go-to choice, obviously. Now videography, well, this is where the OnePlus 9 Pro spices things up quite a bit. I honestly believe that people don't give enough credit to the video game here. It's quite good. See, the gist here is that the OnePlus 9 Pro does not nail the basics, at least not perfectly, because there are phones out there that can handle exposure balance much better, that can focus slightly faster, and even manage HDR sometimes a little bit better. It also doesn't have any HDR10 Plus or Dolby Vision here, so that goes to show that those things, the fundamentals, weren't necessarily the biggest focus. But it's really the crazier, the exotic features that the OnePlus 9 Pro is aiming for, basically. What I mean by that is 4K 30 is great. It's mostly on par with other devices like the S21 Ultra, the iPhone 12 even. I found it to be more than good enough. Sometimes, yeah, the focusing is a little bit slower, or maybe the exposure doesn't really handle itself quite well when the lighting changes a little. The exotic features that I talked about, those start from 4K 60 and go all the way up to 4K 120 or 8K 30. And basically 4K 60 is ridiculously good on the OnePlus 9 Pro. It has great stabilization, dynamic range is almost surprisingly good, colors are great as you'd expect, like it's amazing. It is a bit on the punchy side because unlike photographs, the videos this one produces have high contrast and quite a bit of vibrance, although the color tones are very well maintained, like surprisingly well. It's why I really like the video on the OnePlus 9 Pro. And the 4K 60, as I said, amazing. And even on the ultra wide, it is ridiculously good. 8K on the other hand, well, this is where it really just comes into its own. What I would like to say is that the OnePlus 9 Pro makes 8K video mainstream. It essentially allows you to replace, for the most part, 4K 30 with 8K 30 from the main and the ultra-wide cameras. I think that is a massive achievement, and OnePlus as a whole should be applauded for that. Obviously there's going to be a dynamic range loss, but if you can find the good enough lighting condition, 8K is amazing. Even in like indoors lighting, I found 8K to be more than good enough. And of course, 8K will produce some ridiculously good detail. Same goes for the ultra-wide. Ultra-wide 8K. This is the only phone that I've used which has ultra-wide 8K, and it is phenomenal, to say the very least. It is so good that honestly, I cannot have enough praises for it. I'm such a massive fan of 8K 30 on the ultra-wide. I wish other phones could do this, but unfortunately not. Because the thing about ultra-wide 8K is that it'll give you very good detail, not as much as a main camera of course, but the details are really on another level. But you'll also get the stabilization that's related to the ultra-wide camera, which is just so good to have. Now finally we have 4K 120, as if 8K 30 on the ultra-wide wasn't enough, and it is really just amazing. I think this is the big upgrade that slow motion required, because up until now basically the best kind of slow motion you could get was 1080p 240, and that is good on the OnePlus 9 Pro, but having 4K 120, that kind of an option, it really just makes me want to shoot slow-mo a lot more. And if you think about it, basically every other phone can do this. The S21 Ultra can do it, the iPhone 12 obviously can do it, no question about it. So it's just a matter of when those phones will come out with 4K 120 and 8K 30 on the ultra-wide, and only then can they compete with the OnePlus 9 Pro. In terms of these features, of course, there are definitely other areas where those other devices will excel, where the OnePlus will not. So basically, if you're the kind of person who enjoys these crazy modes and just wants high quality stuff like 8K and 4K 120 and amazing 4K 60, well, there you go, the OnePlus 9 Pro is the one to go for. Although do keep in mind, selfie video on the OnePlus 9 Pro is not good. Like, no question about it, it's just not good. I don't really have much else to say about it. 1080p 30 clearly isn't gonna cut it for a flagship, but far as I've seen, OnePlus didn't really focus much on the selfie camera at all. Like selfies, selfie portraits, or selfie video, it's not really all that good. We don't even have a selfie night mode here. So clearly you're gonna have to just avoid the selfie camera altogether or just deal with it. Like, I know that the OnePlus 9 Pro is not gonna be for all because it doesn't nail the basics. There are gonna be people who want to shoot human subjects. There are gonna be people who want just good, well balanced and consistent 4K 30 video. They don't care about 8K maybe. And for them, the OnePlus 9 Pro is not gonna be a good choice. For the right person, like, I know I'm saying this many times, but I cannot stress this enough. If this phone is gonna suit your needs and your desires for a smartphone camera, only then will you be truly impressed by it. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers.